What's up everybody, Ting here. Alright, so this video is about maximizing your budget in buying the 16-inch MacBook Pro. I assume that by the time you're looking at this video, you've already kind of done your research and maybe you're already a Mac person. So to me, it probably doesn't matter the pros and cons versus PC and Mac you've chosen. But I do want to point out though that I think that the MacBook Pro is a great value and it can now kind of compete with desktops. In fact, it can handle the most, toughest footage to deal with, especially in terms of render times. It's handled 8K raw footage, which you can check out videos that I've done in terms of how it handles it. But ultimately, the MacBook Pro is really delivered in terms of ability. So let's go into the configuration. Let's go into buying it online, and then I'm going to talk about it. And then from there, I hope that you are able to make a good decision on a purchase. But before we start, I hope you'll like and subscribe. I have more videos on video editing and filmmaking. So all right, let's go. Here we are at the base configuration of the 16-inch MacBook Pro. I've chosen space gray, but you can choose silver if you want to. And let's talk about the base configuration. Right now it's at 2.3 gigahertz, 8-core, 9th generation i9 processor. And there's a turbo boost up to 4.8 gigahertz. Then there's 16 gigs of RAM. There is the AMD Radeon Pro 5500 with 4 gigabytes of GDDR6 memory, 1 terabyte SSD, and the rest is very standard too. The 16-inch display, 4 Thunderbolt ports, touch bar, Touch ID. Those things are not going to change. So let's talk first about the processor. You have your choice between the 2.3 and the 2.4 gigahertz processor. They're both the same number of cores. So, and then they're both an i9 processor. So the good thing is you're not trading any kind of sort of different, number of cores or the generation of the processor. You pretty much get something that's either 2.3 or just like slightly faster, which is so I like that you don't have to choose between different processors and different cores. You're literally just choosing between something that's slightly faster, and we just have to weigh out whether that's worth $200 more. Okay, so but as you know, like if you're video editing, if you're doing photo editing, the processor is highly important in terms of render time. So that is something to consider if you're always working and you have a time crunch all the time. It's just gonna, I think, save time, and then as your video gets a little bit more challenging in terms of footage, let's say resolution, then you're gonna see slowdown there. Okay, so let's next talk about memory. So in terms of memory, I think 16 gigabytes is going to be plenty for you if you're handling photos and you're handling HD video. Now, the thing is, if you're if you're going back and forth between photos and videos, let's say, for example, you are running Adobe Lightroom and you're running DaVinci Resolve, then I would say then you want to have at least 32 gigs of RAM. Because if you know photography, Lightroom is pretty intensive in terms of RAM. And so if you're willing to just say, okay, I'm editing video, and only video most of the time, then 16 gigabytes is enough. If I'm only doing photos because I'm a photographer, then 16 gigabytes is enough. If I'm not toggling back and forth, then 16 gigabytes is generally enough. 8K video, then I would say, well, up at the 32 gigabytes. So if you're multitasking a lot, again, so I think the general rule of thumb would be just one or the other for 16. But if you're multitasking at 32 and then really future-proofing it, because remember that you cannot upgrade the MacBook Pro in terms of memory, then you want to future-proof and spend that extra money for the 64 gigabytes if you know that, basically that like your videos are, in terms of footage, they're just going to be larger in size, and same thing as photos. Like, then 64 gigabytes is going to really make a difference. Okay, so that's how I would organize it. I don't think the price increments are unreasonable to what's on the market. Obviously, they're not cheap. So, but just remember that you cannot upgrade the RAM later on. So that that impacts you in terms of, well, how long do you want to take, hold on to this laptop, and also, are you going to resell it even? Okay, so let's move on to the graphics portion. So in the graphics portion, 4 gigabytes of memory is totally enough for HD video. In terms of 4K video, it's okay, I'll say. That means that you can work with 4K video in DaVinci Resolve. However, I would say that, like, if you're using Premiere, then 4 gigabytes didn't seem enough for me. But DaVinci Resolve was enough for me for 4 gigabytes. But then when I ran Premiere, it didn't seem like it was enough. So it depends on what software you're using. So be mindful of that. Obviously, since this is the max, the 8 gigabytes of video memory, then if you have the budget, I would totally max this out. And I think it's $100 is totally worth it then, because that's like the lowest price upgrade, and you're going to get the most value out of 8 gigabytes of video memory. Video memory is highly valuable. Obviously, if you're a gamer, you know that you should get the 8 gigs. All right, so let's move on to storage. So by the way, I think this is probably the first thing you would upgrade, but some people might disagree, but I think that's the first thing I would choose. So moving on to storage, this looks expensive, but I think that if you do a lot of stuff that has a lot of memory, like video has lots and lots of memory, and let's say you travel a lot and you're getting the laptop because you travel a lot, you go to production, you go to set, then not having to carry that extra hard drive is actually going to be extremely valuable, because you have one less thing to dongle or dangle from your laptop. So and the thing is, the quality of the hard drive that they provide is top. I mean, it's not only solid state, but it's NVMe, which means that the transfer rates are super high. So, like, you are seeing write speeds and read speeds of at least 3,000. See, the average SSD is about 500. At 500, and it's 3,000 for this type of SSD storage. So I just know that you're getting 6 times the speed. And that makes a difference. And when you're connecting external SSDs, you can connect multiple ones at that 500 level, and you can, achieve up to 3, connect all 3 or 4, and you can start writing to it, and you're going to hit almost 3,000. And also, all those things are writing to your main hard drive at top speed. It doesn't just kind of slow down after you add 2 hard drives or 3 hard drives. So I think that this hard drive is super valuable, and if you were looking to what you actually pay for SSD drive like this, then it's actually a good value. But do you need 8 terabytes of storage? I would say that most people don't. I think you probably only need 2 and maybe 4 if you're really working a lot. But I obviously have the 8 because I do feature films, and if you do too, you probably would consider it. Okay, so I think the rest of the stuff here is pretty, like, up to you. If you use Final Cut Pro, you would add these things, but they have nothing to do with the configuration. So let's go back though and summarize in terms of priority of how I would start choosing things. So as I mentioned to you, I would definitely choose the video memory. That's a no-brainer. I would upgrade that right away. The next thing I would upgrade is, it would be It would be a toss-up between the CPU and the memory, and because the CPU is cheaper in terms of like it's 200 bucks more versus 400 bucks more, then I would choose CPU. The next thing I would choose is 32 gigabytes of RAM because that's $400 more. The 2 terabyte storage over a 64 gigs of RAM. Again, because we know that we can't upgrade in the future, so all these decisions are final for the most part. And then, so once I've chosen that, then after the 2 terabytes, I would go to the 64 gigs of RAM. And then next I would choose the 4 terabytes, and then finally the 8 terabytes. So there you have it. That's how I would order things. Feel free to comment in the section below what you ended up purchasing. Everyone's needs are different, so I would say that my advice is only as good as if it helps you. I hope you enjoy this video. There's some other videos where I did the speed tests and put it in real world tests, so this is not just based on theory or anything. I love to mod my stuff, and I'm definitely I'm a filmmaker who's working, and I'm active, and I love my MacBook Pro. But I realized it was a very expensive purchase, but for me, it's been totally worth it, and I see how future-proof this laptop is going to be. I think it's going to last at the maxed out configuration at least 3 to 5 years. And so, I'm definitely happy with my purchase. So, I hope you'll like and subscribe and check out more videos on the way. Thanks.